Welcome back to the Space School of was known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place. Today we're back with another Star Wars story, and today we'll be doing What If Anakin Skywalker Fell in Love with Shaak Ti. This will be a deep dive into another love story. We love these love stories, they're so much fun to do. This story will question what could have happened had Anakin Skywalker given up his love interest for Padme Amidala and instead fell in love with the Jedi Council member Shaak Ti. Before we begin this video, smash that like button. Let's try and shoot for 2,000 likes in the first 24 hours, and I will release What If Ahsoka Tano Was the Chosen One. This is a video you won't want to miss. It's really, really cool. Anyways, we're also going to be gunning for 50,000 subscribers, so join the Space School if you want to be part of our incredible journey together. If you have ideas for videos, leave them down below. I do read all the comments, but I don't do crossovers, so don't suggest them because I don't do them. And one last thing, if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story. Thank you for being a grand tier on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It is always greatly appreciated. If you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, watch to the end of the video, and I will teach you how to win it. Anyways, our story begins with the arrival of Anakin Skywalker to the Jedi Temple. Almost a tantalizing location for the young boy. From the world of Tatooine, having been a slave his entire life, this massive change from dirt to concrete and glass was unreal. The city towered into the night sky. Anakin's path forward was unknown. Sure, Obi-Wan could be someone that he could trust, but how much? How much could he trust Obi-Wan? Qui-Gon was the one who was meant to teach him, and now he was replaced with Kenobi. Skywalker had major trust issues, but this new environment would test every inch of his being. Anakin had no friends, and he was entering a class full of students that had known each other since basically birth. Anakin was very much an outcast, and even worse, his new master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, wasn't anywhere near him. Instead, he was stuck with a new person, someone that he didn't know. The teacher was old and grumpy, not exactly the most formidable person to be teaching Anakin. But Anakin had seen worse on Mos Espa. Anakin at the beginning of his training would struggle greatly with everything. Sure, he had his power, and even more than that, the ability to wield the Force unlike any other in the temple. Though, the issue was that his emotions kept him extremely imbalanced. This imbalance would make the students mock him, and the teacher scold him. It wouldn't take more than a week for the kids to call Anakin a slave to his emotions, a harmless joke made to a former slave. Even more so, Anakin was a slave to his emotions, actually. And he didn't know how to control it. Teachers, peers, and Obi-Wan were setting up the boy for the ultimate failure within the Jedi Temple. Anakin was all alone, with no one to comfort him, no one to talk to, and no one to give him advice. His mother would have helped him. Qui-Gon would have helped him. Why wouldn't Obi-Wan? Was it because Anakin had replaced him? Was it because he was envious or jealous? Sure, the thoughts of a 9-year-old boy could run rampant, but was young Skywalker wrong with any of his assumptions? Of course, it were possible that Kenobi wasn't ready to become a teacher, and Anakin suffered because the Council didn't decide to train him with an experienced master. But these thoughts would never reach Anakin's mind. While he understood the complexities of life and servitude, he didn't know the Jedi Order, and so it was within his reason to assume that it was Kenobi's fault for his abandonment. Anakin did have one thing dwelling inside of his mind almost all the time. This was Padme Amidala. She was like an angel, someone so stunningly beautiful. She wasn't a typical girl on Tatooine, at least that of which weren't slaves to the Hutts or being dragged around by crime lords as if they were some sort of objects. Anakin was haunted by everything surrounding him. Without proper ability to heal, he was subjected to worsening the effects that his early childhood left him with. Anakin wanted to be free of this pain, and so his thoughts followed Padme. She comforted him when they were together in space. She always made him feel welcome. When he didn't understand what was going on, she helped him learn. Anakin's stress dreams would become a mixture of reliant dreams and stress. In some dreams, Anakin struggled with everything he faced on the daily. Sometimes he dreamed about the death of Qui-Gon, the closest thing to a father that he had ever had in the few days that he had known him. It was like Anakin could see it in his mind, in his dreams. Every night, awoken by the same dream of the same man being slain with the same blade. It was recording torture for young Skywalker. Then, there was always Padme. She made him feel safe when he was all alone in his room. Darkened lights in the sprawling city outside the tiny window he had. Anakin didn't have C-3PO to keep him company when he woke up. He didn't have his mother to run to, and he didn't have R2 to be his friend. Sure, R2 was a new friend, but nonetheless, he was someone that Anakin immediately bonded with. Anakin felt nothing but isolated, and these dreams kept him up throughout his training. His over-reliance on emotion led him down a dark path. He hid his anger, sadness, and pain during practice, but nearly consumed his entire being with it. Anakin was already a mixture of Vader and himself. Without the incessant breathing and the charred skin, he was making his way towards being Vader. Another nightmare. Sometimes Anakin could hear it, sometimes he could feel it, and sometimes he could see that shadow of darkness lurking in the corner of his room. Anakin's struggles continued on and on for the following years. His thoughts dwelled on those who did right by him, mostly those being his mother, Padme, and Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin couldn't stand his endless training regimens, being separated from the higher levels and classes even though he would be more advanced than them by himself. Though all this imbalance would be derailed by an interaction Anakin had with an older Togruta Jedi Master. In terms of older, Anakin didn't really know, but she wasn't much older than Obi-Wan, at least in his mind. Anakin was attracted to her because she seemed gentle and caring, in almost all the same ways that Padme was for him. He was interested in the Jedi. She taught a class while one of the teachers was instructed elsewhere in the Jedi Temple. Anakin watched this Jedi Master named Shaak Ti as she taught the class. She was kind, wise, and beautiful. Anakin had hearts jumping inside of his pupils and his soul felt warmed. Everything left numb by the torture of the previous few years was beginning to defrost, as the warmth of this Jedi Master created an instantaneous infatuation with Anakin. Padme was removed from his mind almost immediately when he saw Shaak Ti. He didn't care that she was older, he was just a kid after all. It wasn't his fault that he fell for someone with even the slightest amount of gentility or compassion, or even kindness. Even more so, she was genuinely beautiful. There were few Jedi that caught the attention of a child who'd grown up on a scummy, dirty world of Tatooine. Anakin would go months without seeing Shaak Ti. He would interact with other female Jedi like Jedi Knight Aayla Secura and Jedi Master Yaddle, but to Anakin, Shaak Ti was something otherworldly. Anakin's dreams had her comfort him, and she was a cure for scaring away that black skeleton mask that scared him to death almost every night. Anakin's final hopes remained with both Shaak Ti and the fact that he was the Jedi's chosen one. Having something to live up to in of itself was a bit stressful, but Anakin believed in his ability to rely on these to inspire him to succeed. Anakin would remain atop of his class until he graduated and was made into a Kenobi's Padawan. The two of them had a lot of catching up to do. Their various missions meant that Anakin had to trust Kenobi, and Kenobi had to trust Anakin. Neither of them had any trust for one another. It was because they never grew a bond while they had the time to actually do so. Most teachers and their students didn't get extra time to bond, but these two had it, and they didn't use it. Though it could all be blamed on Kenobi for having almost no experience, it was important to mention the fact that the two had known each other for years and had no reason to trust each other at all. Most of this was really troubling for Kenobi. He wanted to be a good master, but he himself was alone. He felt as if he didn't have any guidance. But there was one thing for sure, and that was he wanted to be the best master he could be for his apprentice. He just didn't know how to. Qui-Gon was his master, but he still hadn't even become a knight by the time Qui-Gon passed away. Obi-Wan didn't visit Anakin because the entire time he was trying to watch other teachers. He was trying to research the art of being the master that his apprentice needed. But the issue was that Anakin wasn't a by-the-book apprentice. Anakin was a 9-year-old boy brought to the Jedi Temple after spending his entire life as a slave on a backwater planet like Tatooine. Anakin needed help, and Obi-Wan didn't know what to give. It would be through various and painful missions that they would have to rely on solely one another to make it through. It was at one point when Anakin finally realized that he had a wonderful master. It was quite emotional for him. They both had their difficulties, and Obi-Wan always tried so hard, but Obi-Wan kept himself up endlessly for nights on end trying to be what was best for Anakin. It was a border dispute on one of the mid-rim planets that all of this changed. Anakin was with his master, watching as he negotiated. Anakin did have to give it to Kenobi. He was quite an incredible negotiator. It wasn't a surprise that Jedi kept sending him out to make deals. Anakin watched, and then the man across from Kenobi motioned, and Anakin was snatched up by two henchmen. Kenobi whipped out his lightsaber and danced around. Anakin remembered it so vividly, as the tides of the situation shifted from the worst-case scenario to a dance of beauty. Obi-Wan's Jedi mullet danced in the wind as he cut blasters in half and used the Force to protect his apprentice, when all of a sudden a thermal detonator was thrown at Anakin. Obi-Wan and Anakin made eye contact, as if Obi-Wan could read what Anakin was thinking. Anakin froze up, and Obi-Wan took 3 steps across the room without hesitation. He picked up his apprentice and took him off and threw him to the ground as he jumped on top of him. The blast blew up behind them and incinerated the room. Obi-Wan got up and then prepared to defend his apprentice again. With no one in sight, Obi-Wan picked up Anakin and asked him if he were okay. Anakin just nodded as Kenobi smiled at his Padawan and gently pat him on the cheek as he moved away to report what had just happened. Anakin remembered it so vividly. It was all the tension of their bond being released in one moment, made by Kenobi to protect Anakin from almost certain death. Obi-Wan didn't want praise for this, or thanks for it at all. He just wanted to make sure that Anakin was alright. Sure, there had been moments where Anakin had seen this Obi-Wan, but maybe his resentment blinded him to what truly a good master Obi-Wan was. Obi-Wan and Anakin from that moment became almost inseparable. They were like brothers in arms. Brothers ready for anything the Council threw at them. And though Anakin had become 16 by this time, he still leached on to Shaak Ti. She had him very interested in her, and so Anakin had been trying to pry information about her. He wanted to know more about her. Like a shy schoolboy and his crush, there was no denying that Anakin was nervous of interacting with her. Instead, he asked Kenobi for information. He harbored very strong feelings for her, and he didn't exactly know what to do or say about it. He couldn't tell Kenobi or Yoda about these feelings. Maybe he could confront her. It made his heart spike into his throat. Maybe he should, but he felt he might be too nervous to do so. Anything or everything could go wrong. She could get upset with him and have him barred from the Jedi Order. And now that Anakin wasn't teaching Obi-Wan as much as Obi-Wan was teaching him, he didn't want to lose any of the progress he and his master had made over the past few years. But he needed to get to the bottom of his emotions before his dreams drove him into absolute madness. He couldn't do anything until his mission with his master was finished. Anakin waited patiently to get back to the Jedi Temple. He knew a little about her based on what Kenobi had told her when he asked. And even though Anakin was dead set on going to Shaak Ti himself, he wouldn't ever find himself the ability to do so. Obi-Wan picked up on the emotions of his apprentice and confronted Shaak Ti before Anakin could do so. After all, he still wanted nothing but the best for his apprentice. He was just worried about Anakin's appearance to be extremely attached to this Jedi Master. They hadn't ever really interacted, but Anakin was head over heels, just like it would have been if he were still infatuated with Padme. These emotions still boiled over into an unhealthy obsession with a woman who wasn't even particularly interested in him like that. So Obi-Wan did what he needed to be done. As he rang the buzzer of Master Shaak Ti, he was told to enter. She made it evident to Kenobi that she had some sort of idea why he was here. Obi-Wan explained everything out in full detail. Shaak Ti understood. She wasn't upset or even bothered by this. She knew that Anakin was latching onto someone that made him feel even in the slightest safe. Shaak Ti explained to Obi-Wan that even a simple interaction would have caused this reaction from Anakin. As Shaak Ti continued, Obi-Wan understood more of what she was saying. Anakin's small crush turned into an infatuation by placing someone into a place they didn't belong in. Obi-Wan wanted to know what he could do to help his apprentice. Shaak Ti responded gently, telling him that there was nothing that he needed to do. She continued by telling Obi-Wan that she was going to be what he needed to be for her, not what he wanted her to be to him. The romantic infatuation was just a response from having a singular feeling built up by a lack of response. Obi-Wan nodded, and Shaak Ti followed him out of her room. The two Jedi continued down the corridors of the Jedi Temple, as Shaak Ti listened to everything else Obi-Wan had to say, most of which was a fear that Anakin would be barred for harboring attachments. Shaak Ti responded, explaining that Anakin had no need to worry about being barred from the Council or the Order. She understood that the boy needed something, and she was going to go and confront him. It was the support of someone that he didn't have, someone that was more than just a master, and so Shaak Ti explained that she would talk to Anakin and then teach Obi-Wan how to fill such a role. Because it was uncommon, it wasn't necessarily a new thing to the Jedi. Sometimes the ones taken in at an older age would find the ability to fall in love with someone in the Jedi Order. Kenobi understood, and so he parted ways from Shaak Ti, who made her way down to Anakin's quarters, where he was laying down. He heard the buzzer, so he sat up, but he didn't expect Shaak Ti. Instead, he expected his master to drone on and on about a coming mission, so when he saw Shaak Ti, he jumped out of his skin. Shaak Ti stepped in and told him to relax, as she stood in the room with Anakin. Anakin was nervous. He didn't know what to do. His heart was racing. He wanted to express everything he felt, but would she understand? Shaak Ti knew she needed to approach this delicately. She didn't want Anakin to suffer for feeling the way he felt. So, she asked him what was on his mind. Anakin slumped down. He didn't know how to respond. He was nervous to tell her how he really felt. He didn't know if she were here to banish him from the Order or if she wanted to genuinely help him succeed as a Jedi. Anakin was very stressed by this question, and it was shown on his face. Shaak Ti knelt down and placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder to let him know that it were okay to tell her. She was here for him. And so Anakin stumbled, stuttering and choking on words as he looked at the woman across from him. He told her he was struggling. He had only recently been able to trust Kenobi. Anakin, to some extent, knew that Obi-Wan was trying to help him, but he also felt like Obi-Wan was trying to hold him back from his success. Shaak Ti just listened, and without firing off any rebuttals of what Anakin had to say, because she didn't want Anakin to feel dumb. She wanted him to feel like he could express himself in any way he wanted to. As the minutes continued, Anakin could be seen lessening the tightness on his shoulders. He began to feel comfortable with Shaak Ti as he expressed himself, continuing on and on. His eyes darted to and from her. He didn't know how to tell her that he loved her. But in some way, shape, or form, he was able to etch out the words out of his chest. Anakin looked down into his lap, with the stress written across his face. He asked if she'd report him to the Jedi Council. Shaak Ti lowered herself down to his level and looked at Anakin, and then opened her arms. Anakin naturally slid into them. She then spoke to Anakin, who was being embraced by her, emphatically. Anakin continued with tears in his eyes, telling Shaak Ti that he felt cold, alone, and scared. He wanted to be free of the suffering, but he didn't know how to free himself. Anakin continued. He expressed everything he was burdened by. A lot. Oh, so much he was burdened by. And Shaak Ti just listened to him. She may have been a Jedi from near birth. She may have grown in the unemotional society of the Jedi Order, but it didn't mean that she couldn't feel sympathy, or be what someone like Anakin needed her to be. She understood that everyone was different, and whether it was Kenobi, Skywalker, or Windu, everyone needed something different. For Anakin, it was evident that he needed someone who was more emphatic. Shaak Ti tightened her grip on Skywalker as she listened to the boy cry his heart out. So much pent-up sadness from the several years he was here, and it all came out. Anakin stopped speaking, and then Shaak Ti spoke to him as she rubbed Anakin's back. She told Anakin that she watched him grow from a young boy into a young man. He was growing so much into the Jedi he could be, but it was obvious that he needed some sort of attachment, and the Jedi weren't filling that role for him. She told him that it were natural for the Jedi to have these feelings, but they couldn't act on them. The burden of the Jedi Code was being true to the way of the Jedi. She told Anakin, though plainly, that she wanted to support him and Kenobi in helping Anakin succeed. It was something Anakin never expected, but before he could continue, Anakin let out an extremely weak, "I love you." Shaak Ti wrapped her arms around a little bit tighter and spoke the same words back to him, telling Anakin the same thing. Anakin's heart filled. He realized that it wasn't a romantic love that he needed, but it was a compassionate love, one that would complete the soul, not rupture the heart. Shaak Ti would stay with Anakin for hours as he laid in her arms. Shaak Ti knew that she wasn't breaking the code, but she was taking advantage of the lack of its specifics. She was taking care of a Jedi who tried too hard to be someone he wasn't able to be. As she sat with Anakin, she thought about what she should do for the boy, how she could continue to be supportive of him, even though he wasn't her student. Shaak Ti understood that the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker would have been that of someone who succeeded as a Jedi but failed as a man full of emotions. Shaak Ti needed to make it abundantly clear that Anakin was allowed to love, but not romantically. The time would come when Anakin felt comfortable to get up, as he looked at Shaak Ti with puffy eyes. She smiled at him. Anakin let out a weak smile. He understood what all of this meant. It did mean that his infatuation for Shaak Ti had to end. It was a bit of a heartbreak, but it also meant that Anakin would get all the care that he needed, and that care that he needed, he would get. Anakin over the next few years would blossom. Shaak Ti and Obi-Wan would spend a lot of time with Anakin. Shaak Ti helped Obi-Wan become the mentor that Anakin needed, and Shaak Ti filled in a role that Anakin needed all of his life. As for Anakin's mother, she would never be abducted by the Tusken Raiders. Anakin's thoughts and dreams had been cleaned up by the age of 19 in 22 BBY. He was progressing faster than ever before, and he was easily becoming the most powerful Jedi in the Order. Even more so than that, he was becoming a vessel of balance. Shaak Ti and Obi-Wan didn't really understand how this happened, but they helped Anakin balance himself into the light. He was a lot like Windu in some respect. He was able to harness the light side and the dark side without faltering into the side of darkness. This was something that Anakin did naturally, but with the aid of Shaak Ti and Obi-Wan, Anakin was able to grow in a way that he was able to succeed. With all of what Shaak Ti helped Anakin with, he was ready to be sent to Naboo with Padme Amidala after her failed assassination attempt on the Coruscant landing platforms. But everything on this trip would be strictly business. No flirting on a passenger ship, afternoon picnics on the mountains, or romantic conversations about sand. Anakin was protecting the Senator, and that was all there was to it. When it came time for Obi-Wan to need a transmission sent to Coruscant, Shaak Ti was the first to respond by going to Geonosis with Mace Windu and a group of another couple hundred Jedi. Kenobi would be rescued, but as he was, the galactic conflict would begin. The Clone Wars would begin. Dooku would escape the battle without any sort of confrontation. The war would be off to a rapid start, and Anakin would be brought immediately back to Coruscant. He would be made into a Jedi Knight, passing the trials with flying colors. As the war was beginning, Jedi began being dispatched with massive clone legions across the galaxy. While Anakin was in the temple, he asked for guidance from someone he never felt he'd get it from. But because of Shaak Ti and Obi-Wan's training, Anakin felt a new level of confidence for everything in his life, and so he confronted the Master of the Order himself in his quarters. It was a bit tantalizing of an experience. Mace was quiet. He had never liked Skywalker, but this move was the move of a Jedi who wanted to learn. This showed that Anakin had the maturity and the drive to be a better Jedi than he was already. Even more so, Mace's response would either break any chance of a relationship between the two Jedi, or it would create a new foundation for a brand new relationship between him and Skywalker. But as Mace was Master of the Order, it was his responsibility to aid those who came to him asking for help, and so he helped Anakin. Anakin had a week before his first deployment with the legion called the 501st. During that week, Shaak Ti would be sent to Kamino to oversee operations of the cloning facilities, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would begin his first offensive in the Mid-Rim. While the Clone Wars are off to a rapid start, Anakin and Mace would spar for hours inside of a Jedi training room. Hours upon hours of smashing blades together, Mace would grow a new-founded respect for Anakin, and Anakin would have the same experience for Mace. Mace thought Anakin had it too easy, being the chosen one, but he was actually working hard now, and Mace respected Anakin's grit and attitude towards bettering himself as a Jedi. As the week came to an end, Mace and Anakin had established a genuine connection with one another, a connection that would allow Anakin the ability to come back to Mace, and one that would allow Mace to begin to trust Anakin. Sure, it had some time to grow, but the seeds were planted. Anakin had fallen out of touch with Palpatine over the past few years, staying with Obi-Wan and Shaak Ti. And as the war began, he was being deployed across the galaxy. He would stay out of touch with the Chancellor as he relied heavier on those who seemed to understand him the most. The first being his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the second being almost like his second teacher, or second mother, Shaak Ti. Shaak Ti kept in touch with Anakin to make sure that he was handling the war well. She didn't want him to feel isolated by the battlefront. Because Palpatine was losing Anakin, he had to get to the bottom of why this was happening. Each day away from Palpatine, Anakin was becoming more and more a Jedi, rather than a foreseeable future as a pupil of his. Palpatine decided that an attack on Kamino would suffice after learning that it was Shaak Ti that had changed Anakin around. It was a difficult task, but the Chancellor's office did a deep dive into Jedi Masters Obi-Wan Kenobi and Shaak Ti. Palpatine knew that Obi-Wan and Shaak Ti had to be killed if he wanted any chance of turning anything around for himself. The Battle of Kamino would commence early on in the war, but the attempt to either have Obi-Wan Kenobi or Shaak Ti killed would ruin his attempts to pull Anakin deeper into the darkness. The Battle of Kamino would commence early on in the war, but the attempts to have either Obi-Wan Kenobi or Shaak Ti killed wouldn't happen. Looking to where Kenobi or Shaak Ti might be vulnerable, so that Palpatine could have him killed was something that he was monitoring consistently. The easiest Jedi to kill would have been Kenobi, because he was consistently on the battlefront all the time, but General Grievous could never kill the Jedi General. Kenobi was much too stubborn to die, and Shaak Ti was well too protected either front she went to, those of which being Kamino or the Republic capital Coruscant, two of the most defended places in the galaxy. Even worse for Palpatine, Mace Windu and Anakin became buddies. Especially after a near-death experience, the two bonded closely over a unique perception of the Force. It was an experience where Boba Fett, the son of Jango Fett, blew up an entire Jedi Star Cruiser to have the Jedi Master killed. It failed, but it almost ended the lives of both Anakin and Mace. But because of this experience, their bond grew. Anakin still respected the Chancellor, but he was out of touch with him. So, when the battlefront brought Skywalker to Umbara, he was almost immediately requested back to Coruscant by the Chancellor. Anakin was very upset by this. He wanted to be on the front lines with his troops. He always was. He never left them alone. When he and the Chancellor interacted, there was something off. Anakin's mind had been cleared from everything that his masters had taught him. Windu, Shaak Ti, and Kenobi were what he needed, and they were everything he had. Even more so, Anakin had the ability to visit his mother after the conflict of the Second Battle of Geonosis. He was feeling lively, and Shmi expressed that she were very proud of the man that he became. Anakin had everything leaning in the right direction, and even though he used to be close to the Chancellor, he felt a bit perturbed that Palpatine took Anakin away from the battlefront on Umbara. As Palpatine started bolstering for Anakin, Anakin told him to stop. Anakin had become so mature he no longer searched for the appraisal for all of his actions. He no longer needed an ego boost to feel complete in any respect. Anakin was at the top of his game, and didn't need anyone to build him up or an ego he didn't have. Anakin could also tell something was off. The way that Palpatine was acting made Anakin suspicious of the Chancellor. It was more than just the behavior towards Anakin, but it was all of what seemed a little bit more clearer now that Anakin had found balance with himself. It seemed as if the Chancellor was trying to manipulate Anakin for whichever reason. Anakin didn't trust it. He began to feel uncomfortable by this interaction with Palpatine. It seemed as if he were doing it to stall Anakin. And Anakin really wanted to be side by side with his men on Umbara. And now, he was toiling on Coruscant with the Chancellor who was acting so oddly peculiar. After the Chancellor's meeting with Anakin, Anakin reflected. He was being moved back to Umbara. He didn't want to stay on Coruscant any longer. The second day of battle on Umbara was bloody. There was no way of counting the casualties that the clones had had because of Krell's leadership, but Anakin would be back in time for the third or fourth day of combat. Anakin sat in his ship as it sped up through hyperspace. He thought about everything that had just transpired in the Chancellor's office. It all seemed odd. Something was out of place and he could feel it. Anakin, while in hyperspace, got into contact with Master Windu and told him that he was thinking about something that had just happened, something that was so off with the Chancellor. When Mace asked why, Anakin expressed that Palpatine took him away from combat for no reason at all. It was just like he wanted Anakin to be away from a deadly combat zone. Anakin had read the reports from the first day, and the casualties weren't good. Rex never allowed that many men to die. Mace told Anakin that he would consult the council about what he had reported. Upon Anakin's return to Umbara, he saw that his men had captured a forward command post. It was an airfield of sorts, but it seemed to do the job for a forward offensive. When Anakin saw a group of men walking, he landed his ship. 501st and 212th men in the same group. Anakin was puzzled by this, so he ran over and asked what they were doing. They all stopped, and Rex explained everything that had just transpired. Anakin then asked to accompany the men, which they allowed him to do. When the men reached the top of the lift, they surrounded Pong Krell. Anakin moved around towards the window, leaving no room for escape for the turned Jedi. Anakin ignited his lightsaber and asked if what the clones said were true. Krell just laughed as he ignited his lightsabers. He wasn't going to let a bunch of lab creations kill him, but he had a challenge in front of him, Skywalker. Krell used the Force and shoved all the men to the ground as Anakin held himself up. Anakin and Krell engaged in combat. Krell was a powerful and massive being, two large blades that could strike with incredible strength. Anakin was ready though. Using the powers he had learned with Mace, Anakin was quick to be on his feet. Anakin pushed Pong back as the men watched the two Jedi duel. Their loyalty to Skywalker grew as he stood on their side of the battle, fighting for them. Krell and Anakin balanced back and forth as their duel swayed in direction, though Anakin was much more powerful than the other Jedi. Anakin used the power known as Vapad to help himself in the grand arena of combat against Krell. Anakin was incredibly quick, moving like a blur, each parry a strike. Krell could hardly keep up with his two blades striking at Anakin. Anakin moved so quickly, he cut off one of the arms of the Jedi, and then he twisted his body around in a circle, driving his blade backwards into the chest of Pong Krell. Pong looked at Anakin with shock in his eyes as he fell lifelessly to the ground. The men respected Anakin for helping them, and as the Umbara campaign would come to an end, the war would continue to drag on until one of Anakin's clone troopers killed a Jedi in the heat of battle. A turn of events that would eventually lead Anakin and Shaak Ti to returning to Coruscant because of ARC Trooper 5555, otherwise known as Fives. Shaak Ti and Anakin discussed these turn of events because they seemed extremely odd. A clone trooper killing a Jedi general, and then that clone trooper dying and his friend removing some kind of chip from his mind. Anakin would accompany Fives and Shaak Ti to the Chancellor. Everything would change here, when Five learned of the terrible truth and tried to kill the Chancellor. He would flee, Anakin would chase, but Shaak Ti would stay behind to keep the inhibitor chip safe and check on the Chancellor. Though Palpatine planned for this, he was going to use the opportunity to kill Shaak Ti, and he wanted to make it look like another one of the clones had a chip malfunction. Palpatine, before this, had used the dark side of the Force to convince one of his men of deceit. It was planned from the moment that Fives was being brought to Coruscant. The clone trooper was manipulated by the dark side of the Force to obey Palpatine to make Shaak Ti's death look like another execution of sorts. Of course, these clones wouldn't be brought into the room until Anakin was gone. Fives was gone, and Palpatine and Shaak Ti were left alone. Anakin, who ran after Fives, was able to catch up with him. Because of Shaak Ti's ability to check on the Chancellor, Anakin was able to run after him and catch him quickly. Palpatine didn't anticipate Anakin to catch Fives so quickly, and so, when Shaak Ti turned around after helping Palpatine up, she was jolted with waves of electricity. As Palpatine laughed, he slowly was killing the Jedi Master. The next thing he knew, Anakin opened the door with Fives behind him. Anakin whipped out his lightsaber as Palpatine looked over in shock. He couldn't believe it. He was so close to killing Shaak Ti that he could turn Anakin to the dark side, and now that plan was foiled. Everything was foiled. Anakin marched forward with anger in his eyes as he requested that Fives get Shaak Ti out of there. Fives obliged, and Anakin faced down Palpatine alone. Palpatine still wanted to use this as a teaching moment, as he tried to tell Anakin of the power of the dark side that he was missing out on, a true power that he himself weren't able to achieve as a Jedi. Palpatine explained that Anakin had always been seeking a life of something greater than a normal Jedi, but Anakin cut him off. He wouldn't hear it, because now he knew the truth, that Palpatine was the Sith Lord. Palpatine was upset by this. He didn't realize how deep the nails of Shaak Ti, Windu, and Obi-Wan were in Anakin's skin. Anakin was completely manipulated by the ways of the Jedi, and so Palpatine prepared to kill his dream apprentice. There was almost no way out of this situation. It was either Anakin or him, and the duel was set. Anakin spun into attack against Palpatine. With the power of Vapad, Anakin was leagues more powerful than his Revenge of the Sith adaptation. This Anakin was balanced, and even more than that, he was powerful without arrogance. Palpatine whipped his lightsabers out and twisted around to meet Anakin in the middle of the room. The sounds of the blades echoed throughout the room. It was a room where Anakin became Vader in canon, but now it would be where Vader would be destroyed. This duel casted light into the dark room. It was like the power of the Jedi's Chosen One was bringing the light back into the Force. The duel was fierce. It was highly contested. Anakin against Palpatine, Palpatine against Anakin. Blades clashed at incredible speeds. Anakin pushed a heavy offensive as Palpatine changed into multiple saber forms to throw Anakin off. Anakin was quick to react. He was advanced. He was fully capable of defeating Palpatine in this moment. But he had to harness every ounce of skill he had ever learned. The duel continued. Palpatine was quick. Lightning quick. But Anakin had an answer for every attack. Anakin wouldn't go silently. Twisting around, the two blades clashed. Palpatine brought his second blade around to Anakin's right side. As he used his metallic hand, Anakin grabbed Palpatine's hand. The metallic strength of Anakin's hand twisted Palpatine's wrist until it snapped, causing him to drop his other blade. Palpatine pulled back as Anakin ignited Palpatine's second lightsaber, red and blue together in the hands of Skywalker. Anakin pushed harder and harder, swinging both of his blades as Palpatine tried everything he could to defend himself, but the effort was no matter, as Anakin killed Palpatine with his own lightsaber. Anakin dropped the Crimson Blade and sheathed his own and then ran to Shaak Ti's aid. He ran out the doors and held up Shaak Ti. She was very injured and in critical need of assistance. Anakin picked her up gently and carried her down to the medical bay so that she could be taken care of. At the same time, Anakin asked Fives to get Windu or Yoda or another one of the Jedi Masters here immediately. The investigation of the death of Palpatine would begin for the Republic. With Fives as a witness, and as the sole person who heard what Palpatine told him, he was able to leverage the trials off of Anakin. The trials found that Sheev Palpatine was the creator of the Clone Wars, the Clone Army, and the Separatists. Because of this revelation, the Separatists and the Republic came together to end the war. Though the Separatists could have prolonged the war and even probably beat the Republic, the only continuation of the war was General Grievous himself. He would lead a little droid rebellion until he was killed by Anakin and Shaak Ti over Malastare. Dooku would be tried and found as a war criminal who knew of the plot to overtake the galaxy and become leader of an empire. As the galaxy picked up the pieces, Anakin would find himself on the Jedi Council after Ahsoka rejoined the ranks of the Jedi Order after their mission to return to serving the galaxy. Maul would be snuffed out at the same time by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maul would lose one final duel to his longtime rival. As the galaxy moved past the reign of the Sith, it looked towards the kindness of the Jedi and their ability to spread throughout the galaxy on their mercy missions to help people in a new effort to create peace. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes so that we can get that Ahsoka being the chosen one video tomorrow. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below in the comment section. I do read all of your comments. Again, I don't do crossovers. Check out the Twitch community Discord and Patreon if you want to be a part of the community or support me in other ways. For those of you that want to win a lightsaber, here is how you win a lightsaber. Just go down below. I have a little link. That is a doc link. You click the link and then you go and you put your name down or your email, whatever you want to put, just put it down. I'll accept it whenever I read it. Don't delete anybody else's. All the rules are on the docs themselves. So that's how you win a free lightsaber. I'll be giving away one lightsaber on June 4th and one lightsaber on July 4th. So let's try and shoot for 50,000 subscribers as we go for those goals. Anyways, let's talk about the story that we have here. I think this story was really quite interesting. I'm actually really quite proud of it. When I first started it, I was really interested in how I would make Shaak Ti and Anakin work. It's a very interesting relationship because Shaak Ti is about 35 years old when Anakin is brought to the temple. She's like 10 years older than Anakin, or than Obi-Wan, sorry. And I was like trying to figure out how I want to do that, and I really don't want to do something creepy here. So I was like, I could kind of turn this around, and I think the overall story is that Anakin needed somebody that wasn't a love relationship, and I think that was the moral of the story. Is that while it would have been nice for him to have an emotional attachment inside the Jedi Order, like the Aayla Secura video that we had done a while back, I think Shaak Ti would have realized that Anakin needed something more than romance. Anakin needed something more. And while you can say I dissuaded you or tricked you, it says Anakin fell in love with Shaak Ti, not Shaak Ti fell in love with Anakin. So I'm not giving back your 42 minutes for being deceived by a video that clearly said what the video was about. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, all jokes aside, I mean, I really like where we went with this. I really tried to focus on the emotions of a young Anakin Skywalker going into this, and talking about how someone like Shaak Ti could really change his life around by just being what he needed. Anakin was a very delicate individual, and he really just needed somebody to care for him, someone that would just go out of their way a little bit more, a little bit extra out of their way, just to make sure that he was happy, to make sure that he was doing okay. And I think that if Shaak Ti had done that in this situation, I think Anakin would be much better off than he was in canon. I also like the idea that Palpatine died in the way he did. You guys talk about Palpatine getting shanked all the time. It's hard to write different ways to kill off Palpatine, and I really do try hard to make it unique every time. I don't want to do the same situation. I don't want to do the 4 Jedi and then something else happens and something else happens. It gets repetitive, and I want to do something different. It's hard. Palpatine's the only villain ever in Star Wars, and you have to kind of come up with a new way to kill him off every single time. So unless it's going to be a dark side story, and that just wasn't this, I think Shaak Ti would have been what Anakin needed. And while this kind of hinges on the lines of what we did with the Anakin being trained by Shaak Ti, I think this is a complete different story because of Shaak Ti's importance in the role of being a mother-like figure for Anakin rather than a romantic figure for Anakin. But I think in the same respect, it's kind of like how Anakin fell in love with Padme, Anakin fell in love with Padme because she was almost like a mother figure to him in a really creepy way. But that's exactly how she's described. She's described as a mother-like figure. And I think what Anakin really needed was somebody that was an adult not to be in love with him. And I think Padme failed him there by being an adult that fell in love with him. And I think that really hurt Anakin in the long run, especially because Anakin and Padme is so toxic. But I don't think Shaak Ti would have fallen in love with Anakin. I think she would have been the Jedi that he needed her to be, the mother essentially that he needed someone to be, or the parental figure. And I think she would also help Obi-Wan in that same respect. Anyways, guys, I really do hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and do all the things. We're shooting for 50,000 subscribers. I'll probably do another giveaway for 50,000, another large giveaway, much larger than 3 lightsabers. Anyways, though, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love. And always, my friends, remember, may the Force be with you.